Okay, it's 11. Welcome, everyone. My name is Locke Quartang with Senator Warner's team. In this session, our second breakout session, is social media's impact on mental health. We have three great speakers with us today, and I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves and start our presentation.
Hi, guys. I am Katherine Liebesny. I am a child psychiatrist at Carilion Clinic, and it's a pleasure to come and talk with you guys today. And thank you for choosing our session. There's a lot of choices this morning, so thanks for coming to join us. So I'm going to start us off talking first about kind of what we know about how social media may or may not impact mental health. And then Bethany is going to pick it up from there and help us with some practical tools about how do we kind of use social media in a healthy way, and how do we, most importantly, guide and protect our kids to do that. And then, as we know, phones keep us busy and they keep us up. Dr. Abhishek Reddy is also going to talk with us a little bit about the role of screens and our sleep, and basically help us learn, how to guide our kids on healthy sleep behaviors. So that's kind of the overview of our group today. So as I said, I'm a child psychiatrist. I am also a mom. I have an almost 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. So the truth is that I'm not in this woods yet, guys. I am as a professional, but not as a parent, right? My kids don't have phones. They do use screens, but they don't have phones. So, just to tell you, we don't have any disclosures, none of us in the group. No financial disclosures. But I am prepared that in not so long, I am going to be hearing from my kids, everybody is on social media. Why can't I have social media? And I see some heads nodding. So these are questions and comments that people are familiar with. So the truth is that everybody is on social media. The vast majority of adolescents and a pretty high preponderance of adults are using social media. So to tell our kids that they can't be on it, they'll never have it, is a hard conversation to have. They probably will be on it eventually, and so how do we help them with that? The other thing that, is always out there is, when should my kids have a phone? What kind of phone? So just to give you guys a little bit of statistics right now, 95% of teenagers, 13 and older, have at least access to a smartphone. About 85% of them have a phone of their own, 89%. What about preteens? Well, there was a study that on 11-year-olds, about half of 11-year-olds have their own phone. And that number goes skyrocketing up to 85% when you get to 14. So somewhere between kind of 11 and 13, 14 is when a lot of kids are starting to get their first phone. Why do we think that we need to be more cautious about social media with teenagers in particular? Part of it is developmental. So teenagers are at a particularly high risk. Normal things that are happening in adolescence put us at risk for some of the impacts that we see from social media. So it's normal in adolescence to have really great days and really bad days all at the same time. Their well-being is doing this all the time, and that's normal. It's also normal to be pushing the boundaries, to be taking more risks, to be trying to figure out who you are as a almost independent individual, and how that's same or different from your family and your community. They're really focused on the opinions of their peers. That's a very normal shift as you go from school-age kids, like elementary-age kids, to the beginnings of middle school and pre-adolescence. Mom and dad's opinion does not matter anymore. What my friend thinks matters the most. And so this is a platform where we learn a lot about what our friends think is important. With that and that kind of desire for increasing independence, they're a lot less accepting of parental influence. And so how we get buy-in, that we have oversight over what they're doing on their phones and on these social media platforms, is a very natural tug of war. The other thing is that in adolescence, this is a natural time for many mental health conditions to emerge. And that's probably many factors that contribute to that, not the least of which probably is puberty and hormones. So it's typical to see first onsets of depression in early and middle adolescence. So there's a lot going on that put kids at risk. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything about social media is bad, right? Because that's just not true. There are a lot of things that are positive about social media. These are places where people do very creative things. People who are in very isolated places find community that they may not actually be able to find in person, in proximity to them. But there are downsides too. So we know that a lot of time online can actually contribute maybe to more isolation than connection. Cyberbullying is a huge problem, and it isn't just a problem, among young people, right? The toxicity of communication is really pervasive. We talk a lot about the curated life on platforms like Instagram, right? A representation that everybody's life looks like this. And when you're a young person, you're still developing a lot of critical thinking skills. So it's understandable that you would genuinely believe that that is the day-to-day life of everybody else but you, when you don't have the representations of the more regular stuff, right? So these are important factors. I would love to tell you that the science on social media and mental health is clear and convincing, but that also is not something that I can say truthfully to you guys. So the science on how social media affects mental health is muddy, and it's muddy because studying this stuff is actually pretty difficult. A lot of studies use really different definitions of media use. Some of them are narrowing right in on social media. Others are including all screens, which includes the amount of time kids are on TV or on video games. These are apples and oranges, and it's really hard to kind of come up with really clear conclusions about what these things do to our health and well-being. And they don't all measure the same outcomes. Some are really focused just on depression. Others are focused on sort of ill-defined concepts like well-being and self-esteem. So when you pool all these studies together, you start to kind of see there's so much, we call it in science heterogeneity, or kind of differences among the studies, that it's hard to draw really clear conclusions. But I'm going to tell you some of the most consistent themes that I see in the literature. The first thing is that we focus a lot on screen time, and the American Academy of Pediatrics offers some guidance on screen time in young kids, all of which is very evidence-based. But time alone actually doesn't seem to be the biggest factor. And so just setting time limits on how long your kid can be on their phone, how long your teen is spending on social media, probably isn't a very impactful step. What we do see is that problematic use correlates the most with problems related to mental health and school performance and social relationships. So let's take a minute to talk about what problematic use is in the literature. Problematic use is use that's compulsive, addictive, and very socially or emotionally dependent, meaning I can't live without my social media. My whole worth is defined by how many likes that I got. So when your engagement with social media is kind of in that realm, that seems to correlate more with the difficulties that we're seeing. We also see, generally, that this trend is a little stronger in girls than in adolescent boys. And I do want to say that these studies do not do a good job of differentiating whether we're talking about assigned sex at birth or whether somebody identifies as female, male, or otherwise. But there's something in the group that has been labeled female that seems to be more at risk. Cyberbullying is probably one of the strongest things that we can say that has a negative effect on the emotional well-being of kids. So, and again, adolescent girls seem to be more often victimized by cyberbullying online. And in the studies that look at what does cyberbullying potentially correlate with, it increases people's risk of actually thinking about suicide and thinking about a plan for suicide, making attempts to end their life, and engaging in self-harm behaviors. It does other things too, but of course, these are the things as a parent and as a child psychiatrist that I am most concerned about. So I want to tell you guys that I presented some of this information to a group of psychiatrists last March up in Virginia Beach. And my point to them was being bullied, hearing that from our patients, that you're being bullied on social media really is a risk factor for suicide. And posting about suicide or self-harm is a true risk factor for suicidal thinking and behavior. People post all sorts of stuff online. And we've become so numb to that as a community that we often dismiss it. It's just a thing that you said yesterday, but maybe has no meaning today. And what I was telling my colleagues in March is, please don't dismiss this. I need you to take this seriously as the clinicians who are seeing these kids in your office and in the ER as a true risk factor. And why I'm saying it to you guys is that I hope that as parents and professionals, educators, whatever you are in this room to kids and teens, that if you know about this stuff, you know that this is actually a really big red flag and you can do anything you can do to help that person get evaluated and get some help. I'm also somebody who spends time talking to kids about eating disorders, and I hear a lot about social media in my work doing eating disorder clinic. So I wanted to kind of give you guys a little info on that. So disordered eating, first of all, is very, very common behavior among adolescents, but we don't have a lot of resources across Virginia for eating disorder treatment, and many, many fewer kids who would benefit actually come to care. There was a study in Australia of older middle schoolers looking at the influence of their social media behaviors and how they self-rated kind of thoughts about their body and eating disorder behaviors that they were engaging in. And it was really enlightening that, Snapchat came up a lot in girls as being a platform that if you were using, you had a lot more angst about your body and behaviors trying to change your body. And posting selfies or having your friends post pictures of you also correlated a bit more with these behaviors. So as I said, Bethany is going to talk a little bit about, how do we guide ourselves and our kids on social media use. But I think we need to think a little bit about the platforms that are very video and very photo based and what's being taken pictures of and displayed. So the other point I wanted to note is that in this particular study, any behavior on social media, any use of social media among these middle school boys seemed to correlate more with this sort of challenge of self-esteem and eating disorder behavior. So big note, our boys are not immune. And I can just say from my own clinical experience that the boys who make their way into clinic with me have a real preoccupation with the portraits of what it means to be very masculine or very athletic, and a lot of unhealthy images and suggestions that are out there on how to achieve that look. So I'm going to conclude with saying that the literature gives us probably more questions than answers. We need a lot more information to say definitively what kind of social media is healthy, or how do you use it in a healthy way, and what's more concerning. Also, who's at risk? Some people are having these well-being outcomes from using social media, and other people are, having their mental health deteriorate. How do we know who's going to kind of go down one path or another? We need to have a better understanding of that. We do know that social media can interfere with sleep, and maybe it's actually sleep that's at the bitter root of these problems, and social media is just kind of a confounder in this process. Abhi's going to talk about that. And I'm going to hand it over to Bethany to kind of tell us okay, this is murky, this is complicated. What can we do with the information that we have to protect our kids?
Hello. Is this one on? Is it working? I'll just use it. That's okay. Is that okay? Awesome. Hi, I'm Bethany. I am a counselor educator and a licensed professional counselor in Virginia. And I'm also a parent. So I have a 10-year-old, a 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And unfortunately, I was thrown into children having devices very early. When my daughter was 7, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so her cell phone is quite literally her lifeline for living, which brings up lots of interesting conversations in our house because she's a counselor as a mom. And so we get the discussions of, well, so-and-so has this, so-and-so can have these apps, and I have the device, why can I not have them? And it's a lot easier to have that conversation with one of my clients or one of my students versus your own child. So I've learned a lot in all realms of working with social media in the counseling and mental health. So these are some popular sites and apps that you might have seen. My purpose is neither to endorse, condone, or dismiss any of these. These are just apps that I have seen have an impact on myself, on my children, on my clients, on my students. So these are just to give you an idea. We're in a time where digital connection has skyrocketed. Following COVID, where literally that was the only communication some of us were able to have with our family, our friends. Coming out of school, I remember I actually went on spring break at the university I was teaching at into maternity leave to have my youngest and never went back. So I never went back to that university. So everything that I did was online. And so knowing about these and bringing that awareness is kind of what I want to give you with these apps. And also an understanding and awareness of the needs of our adolescents. So again, coming from the digital age, our adolescents, our teens, ourselves are very used to that instant gratification. We like I can get on my phone and Google something and look it up in 30 seconds. Versus having to go get out a dictionary or an encyclopedia, that instant gratification. Katie touched on it as well, so wanting to fit in. Our kids, our adolescents, they want to fit in. They have the urge and the need and the desire to fit in, and this is a way that we can do that. So again, positive or negative. In counseling, I always say there are no black and whites. It is all gray area, and we have to make the best informed decision that's going to promote the well-being and the health of our children, our adolescents, and ourselves. So again, some of these you might have seen. X, historically known as Twitter, from when I would have been on there. YouTube and YouTube Kids, video-based apps. Reddit, which is an interesting one to me. I find a lot of diabetes information on here, so I can kind of go both ways, but it's kind of an open platform where you can ask questions and get replies, sometimes from professionals, sometimes from robots, who knows. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, Ask FM, which I believe is very similar to Reddit, where you can just post an anonymous question and get all these responses. Be Real, Kick, and Kids Messenger. So all of these are ones that are very popular and all have great intentions, but sometimes can be negatively used as well. My kids love YouTube. You know, sometimes it's America's Funniest Home Videos, but in our hands, which they love. However, we get in that rabbit hole and we get down to that material that is not appropriate, age appropriate, no matter what limits we set on it, right? And so after I kind of go through the apps, I'll get more in depth about what we can actually do. But I did want to mention too that gone are the times where, I'll age myself, some of you are not this old, but we used to go home from school, and if we were bullied that day, it was done, right? You went home, you went to bed, and you just hoped something else happened before the next day, or by Monday if it was a weekend. Summers were spent not connecting unless you wanted to call your friend's house and talk to the parent to go get the kid and then be able to talk to them. It's not that way. We are constantly in connection. I can look right now on my watch and see what my daughter's blood sugar is. We are in constant contact 24/7. We do have the ability, but are we using the ability to disconnect? Sorry, I do have my notes because I get anxious and nervous. Other apps to kind of be aware of are games that come with messaging. And so my kids love these, and we have our conversations about these. So Roblox, Among Us, Fortnite, Minecraft, these are just a few examples of common games that our kids are playing. That can seem very great. Some of them have STEM or STEAM, where you can build different communities and you can gain understanding of engineering and math and science and all those great things until we get to the point where there are messaging, right? And so a lot of these apps that I've shown are free. You can download them, you can create accounts with your email, your phone number, but then some of them have fees. And so I caution pretty much everybody I talk with to be aware of those, because once you're able to purchase something, that's when things start to get a little bit deeper. So the messaging opens, and you can message with literally anybody else that has an account. Does anybody remember AIM? And do we remember posting or sending a chat ASL? Does anybody remember what that was? So age, sex, location. And we were messaging, I'll take myself out of it. People were messaging and giving out their age, their sex, and their location. That's where these happen these days. So it's not in one platform, it is in multiple platforms where we can give out this information and people can get that information as well. So by signing up for these apps, we can put as much or as little information as we want, and so being able to understand what those are, we'll talk about as well. And Katie kind of talked about the time limits, the parental limits, but it goes so much deeper than that as well. So I could give my kid 15 minutes. There's a lot that can be done in 15 minutes. So it's more important that we have the discussions. Another thing that I wanted, that I see a lot in my world as a counselor are secret sites or vault apps. And these are apps that are made to look like general applications that are going to be on our phone. Your photos, a calculator, a calendar. And this is where individuals, whoever, can hide apps or content that they have searched for. And so knowing what these look like and having an understanding is very important, but also having the courage to talk with our children about these, whoever you're a caregiver for or care about, understanding what these camouflage apps are. And they're always changing. So again, that gray area, I could show you 100 pictures and they'll probably be down by tomorrow. So keeping that communication open and knowing kind of what we're looking for is important. So what do we do with all this information? I'm going to teach you 3 counseling skills, very basic counseling skills that deal with open communication. And so at the very base, when our students come in, we say you need to have these 3 core ideas. and that is genuineness, empathetic understanding, and unconditional positive regard. So when we are having these conversations with our students, our children, whoever we might care about and we're a caregiver for, keeping that open communication, which looks different for all of us. So how I talk to my 10-year-old girl is very different than how I talk to my 8-year-old boy and my 4-year-old boy. Not just developmentally, but just how we have those conversations and our comfortability with each other. And they're ever changing, right? They're always evolving. And so I teach our students to have this open communication, and what that looks like is being genuine with our concerns. So has anybody ever heard the term of using I statements? Anybody know what I mean by I statements? You have? Some of you have? Yeah? So instead of saying, I don't want you on this site, saying, I am concerned about you being on this site because. How many of you have gotten their response because I said so? How many of you have used because I said so? Right? Our adolescents do not like that. They are curious. They want to be educated. They are resilient if we give them the tools to be resilient. So being able to have those genuine conversations and using those I statements, yes, and I'll just use my kid's name. Yes, Sadie Mae might have TikTok, but I don't know what conversations her parents have had with her. I don't know what limits they have on those. I'm concerned for your safety on these because I cannot access them and I can't control everything. Do I want to be in complete control of my children? 90% of the time, but I also know that they have to be able to engage in these areas and sometimes make mistakes or find things out on their own, but protecting them as best I can along the way. So being genuine, empathizing with our kids and having these conversations. Again, time limits. So all phones, you can set individual time limits. Apps, you can set individual time limits. But also having time limits within your conversation and your open communication. So not using it as much as a reward, but saying like, if you do these 15 minutes on screen time, then what are we going to do after that? And making that an open communication. So, okay, if you do this, then we're going to go outside for 30 minutes after, and we're going to throw the football, or we're going to play with your siblings, or go next door. My kids would love to be inside all day, every day. We are not outdoorsy people. We don't love it. So we're constantly coming up with other ideas. Read a book. Going back to the old days, what are things that we used to do to keep our kids safe from those? Having download restrictions. So if you do want to, again, I don't endorse or dismiss any of these, there are apps that parents can download that can monitor all of the information that's going through your children's phones. There's ones such as Bark, Net Nanny, Aurora, and these are apps that you can download on your phone that you get everything that happens on your child's phone. So if they're sending text messages, if they're downloading apps, any kind of messages they're sending, and those can vary. So you can have very strict restrictions, you can have open restrictions, but also going back to having that open communication with the children you're caring for. Being informed, so all of these apps that I showed you previously are free. There's paid parts with them, but they are all free. I think it's very informative to download these apps for yourself and take a look. I suggest all of the adolescent that I work with, their parents, to download them. See what it looks like, see how you can manage it, what limits you can put on, know the cautions. So Roblox, for example, has games that are just appropriate for 7 and plus or 7 and under. That doesn't mean they're not going to get to those other games that aren't appropriate. That doesn't mean they're not going to have access to messaging. So just making sure that you're informed on what the apps are, what they look like. The financial insight, so again, most of these social media sites are free. When they have a fee, that's when we start to get a little bit more into the other concerns like messaging, being able to send video messages. Also with that open communication, talking with our kids about what our concerns are when it comes to privacy. not letting out your phone number, your address, where you live, where you go to school, being cautious about the pictures you're posting on Instagram. My daughter wants an Instagram because she dances and she wants to be on there to post all of her dance stuff, and wants me to monitor it. However, if I post that we're at Hotel Roanoke and she's up here dancing and there's the big sign behind, everybody is going to know where we're at that time. So the same cautions you would take for yourself, making sure that our kids understand the importance of those. And then just staying involved. Having those open conversations. Again, I said it's a lot easier for me sometimes to have these conversations with my clients and my students versus my own children. And my kids, again, hit the jackpot. They have a mom that's a counselor. So they get to have these conversations and they get to learn about these things. But it's difficult. It's difficult being a caregiver and wanting your kids to be included and wanting them to feel like they do fit in. And a lot of times thinking about the bullying that Katie mentioned, our kids can be on these sites to be themselves. So maybe they don't get to be themselves at school, or they're getting on these sites to be somebody else, right? Maybe who they aspire to be. And so there is some comfort in that, right? So we do have some safety, but there's also some negative effects that come from those. I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Reddy to talk about sleep and how it interacts, but I'm happy to answer any questions related after as well. We know this one works.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay. So my name is Abhishek Reddy. I'm a child psychiatrist, and I work with Dr. Liebesny at Carilion Hospital, and I have a training in adult child psychiatry and also trained in sleep medicine. So I wear different hats, and I also do some TV interviews for raising awareness about sleep. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. The next slide. Okay, that's fine. I also have, I'm married and I have a 4-year-old, and we all live in Roanoke. We love Roanoke. We moved here 4 years ago, right during the pandemic. The mountains are beautiful. We love it here. So before I go with my slides, I just wanted to see, and you can raise hands to my questions, yes or no. I might ask some more in between some of our slides. No judgment, and I'll also raise my hands when included. So the first question I had is, how many of you all feel or think that in the last week or yesterday night, you could have slept better? All of us, so we have consensus. The second thing is, and also many of you have kids, how many of y'all feel like kids could have gotten better sleep last night or in a week? Okay. The other thing I was thinking about is, how many of y'all feel that screens, social media, TV, media world tries very hard to interfere with our kids' sleep at night? We have a consensus. And how many of us feel or think that we could benefit from strategies, not medication, just strategies to help our kids sleep at night? All right. So we all have a consensus on most of this, so I think we could just talk about a few of these. I like to start with this slide because it gives us a perspective of our life in terms of sleep. So it's said that on an average, we sleep 1/3 of our life. So for a 60-year-old, 20 years of sleep, that's a lot of time we spend sleeping. So evolutionarily, if you think about it, sleep plays a very important role, not only in our lives as human species, but also other animals, mammals, etc. So why do we sleep? I always thought about it growing up, and it's pretty interesting because we spend a lot of time. And there are some important things or factors that play a role, genetics, evolution. But first thing is definitely energy conservation. We sleep at night, we rest, our blood pressure drops, our heart rate drops, our brain is cooling down, and we are kind of regenerating, I guess, at night. Memory consolidation. Studies have shown that our memory is better when we sleep more or better at night. And the last thing is different stages of sleep help our brain rest and recuperate at night. A good example that I can give is, and this is research-based too, the less you sleep, because as we age, we sleep less, and you could also see that as we age, our memory goes down. Alzheimer's and dementia, these conditions have a strong correlation with sleep. So if we are not sleeping well, our brain is not developing well. So bottom line, different stages of sleep really, really help with brain growth. There's just a slide. I know this is a slide with a lot of words, and I don't like that, but it's a table from CDC, which talks about at different age groups how much you need to sleep. I'm not going to read everything, it's on CDC, but just as a summary, if you see newborns sleep a lot, infants and toddlers need to sleep a lot, preschoolers 10 to 13 hours. It might include naps too. School-age kids sleep 9 to 12 hours, teenagers 8 to 10, adult 7 to 9, depending on our age. And I know this is a slide with a lot of numbers on it, but in it, and I know you hear that 8+ hours sleep, that is important. Yes, that is important, but in addition to that, I think the quality of sleep is also important. So laying in your bed is important, but at the same time, resting yourself when you lay in bed is also important. I'm going to get to the crux of the matter here. So screens and sleep, right? I just put 2 images. And as Dr. Liebesny and Bethany was saying, we don't endorse or denounce any of the screens or apps, and we don't have any financial conflicts or interest with any of them. This is just for education. So I'll start with the right one. I just Googled like an image and it came up. I don't think it's Netflix, or I don't know if it is or if it is not, but look at all the apps, all the TV shows and everything that you have available. And especially if you have TVs in the bedrooms, it is so easy to start a show or start a series, and then one thing leads to another, and you go on and on and on it. How many of y'all had this experienced? As a rule in my house, we don't have TVs in the bedrooms. My wife wanted one, and we discussed that, and I had to give her a gift instead of a TV in the bedroom. So now she has a gift, and we are both happy about that. But we don't have TVs in our bedroom. But even if you watch a TV or a show on the iPad and stuff, there's a term for it. It's called mental stimulation. So it's not only that the blue light from the screens of the TV, either in the bedroom or in the living room, on the iPad or the phone, it's not only the blue light which is causing you to be more awake, because blue light, when we look outside in the sky, it kind of stimulates daylight, and it prevents you from falling asleep. I have a next slide which talks about that. But mental stimulation is something that prevents us from falling asleep, and if you wake in the middle of the night, it also prevents you from going back asleep. So blue light is a problem, mental stimulation is a problem, and we all know, like, once we start a TV series, right, and the producers and directors are so strategic, at the end of the series, they'll have a cliffhanger, and you're like, what is happening? And you want to see the next thing for 15 minutes, and they keep you hooked on. The left one is about, it's not a picture of me or my wife, but it's like a social media image, right? So I'll give you an example in my life, and you can tell me how often this happens. So if you see something on social media at the middle of the night, or even before falling asleep. So, for example, I saw a picture of one of my friends, I think it was Costa Rica or Aruba or someplace, and then I'm thinking, oh, not stuck, but I'm in Roanoke, and I love the mountains, but I'm not like in a sunny place, and it's wintry. And then, right before you're sleeping, you're alone, there's no distractions, so you're kind of going into the rabbit hole about, what are the choices I've made in life? Why is that person more successful? And they may not be going to Aruba all the time, and I might be going to Florida before or after a month and still enjoying that. But how often does this happen when right before you sleep or while you're sleeping, you look at social media and then you go down the rabbit hole? It happens to me if I'm on it. And think about how often, as others were talking about it, how often it might happen with kids if they are on social media or screens, comparing themselves to others. And nighttime, I think, is more vulnerable because you're not talking to anyone, you're not distracting yourself. You and your thoughts are the only people with you, between yourselves. The other one is talking about distractions, right? The notifications on your phone and stuff. So a good example I can give on myself is if I'm on call, I wake up in the middle of the night, if there are like with the distractions, it's hard for me to go back to sleep at that point. But in those times, if I accidentally open social media, or even in my email, and it has like, oh, this credit card bill is pending, and then I'm like, yeah, I can pay it. And then I'll go to that, and then I'll see, okay, there's some new charges which I don't know if I did or not, and then I go on investigating into that, and that takes away 15, 20 minutes of my time. So screens, distractions, blue light, all this combination definitely makes things worse. In addition to that, we all have normal awakenings in the middle of the night. Adults, kids, it's totally normal because it's how our sleep cycles are built in. But if you stimulate yourself in between those awakenings, so for example, you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. You go, come back, not on the screens. It might take some time, but you may go back to sleep. But if you have a screen, if you check your phone, if you go to TV or anything screen-related, mental stimulation, it's going to be harder for you or anybody to go back to sleep, even the kids. So a couple of slides to kind of discuss all of that. This slide is about light and melatonin, right? Simplified slide, sunlight decreases melatonin. That includes blue light. Nighttime or darkness kind of increases melatonin. So this is endogenous melatonin, which is already secreted by your brain. You don't have to take extra. And we know there are a lot of supplements and stuff, but melatonin supplements would not help if you are on your screen right before going to bed because they're fighting off each other. Quick screen recommendations. American Academy of Sleep Medicine and most sleep organizations talk about not having screen time, at least 60 minutes. Some of them even say 90 minutes, but 60 minutes, the worst 30 minutes at least before going to bed. Avoiding screens in the bedroom is a strong suggestion. Relaxing routine at bedtime is very important. I think Bethany was talking about it, reading, calming activities before bedtime. There's been some studies which show that people who, even kids, adults mostly, who read before they go to bed, fall asleep faster because it kind of soothes their mind. Books do not stimulate you mentally as much as screens or social media would. If you're reading Harry Potter, you're really going to think about the Harry Potter world, but not compare yourself actively with Harry Potter and the magic. So. Relaxation techniques. There's a lot of terms like guided imagery and other things, but I'll tell you like a practical, quick thing that really helps. So for example, as I said, when I'm on call sometimes and I awake, it's hard for me to go back to sleep once the phone wakes me up. So I'll keep the phone aside and kind of think about things that kind of calm me. So I used to like, as growing up in India, I used to like traveling in trains. It really put me to sleep. So I kind of imagine myself as if I am in the train going to sleep. So when my brain starts saying, oh, what about the presentation you have to work tomorrow? I'll be like, well, I'm on this train. For now, let me enjoy the train. I'll think about the presentation tomorrow. Or even I fall asleep whenever I'm traveling in planes and every other place. My wife thinks I'm very lucky. I think I am. But when I think about things like when I get up in the middle of the night and my brain is racing about certain presentations or certain things I have to do the next day, then I'll be like, well, I'm sleeping in this plane right now. Let me think about this presentation when my plane lands. And so some people talk about beaches, like imagining yourself being on a beach kind of is soothing. So this is like a snapshot of what we call guided imagery. You can have noise machine in your room. And this works even for the kids. When you talk to these about the kids and parents kind of try to teach them, and I try to teach them, teenagers really like this. Sometimes they will say, oh, it's hard for me to imagine, but you can practice it and it really helps. So these are kind of the relaxation techniques that you can encourage kids and family members to do. There's a couple of slides about how sleep and mental health are closely related. This is from way back, but this was one of the landmark studies which talked about patients who had mental health problems or patients who slept poorly had mental health problems, and it was like closely related. Yeah, I just have a couple more slides. So this is about the cycle of sleep and mental health. Poor sleep causes fatigue, which causes difficulty focusing, which causes stress and worry, and that causes declining mental health, and then that causes poor sleep and insomnia, because worrying at night or before night will cause this vicious cycle. So multiple studies have shown that like poor sleep and mental health are very, very closely related. So the summary of my few slides is definitely avoid distractions at night as much as you can, screens, hard conversations, things like that. Good quality sleep is very important. Sleep and mental health have a very strong link, and definitely when in need, always ask for help. Talk to your PCB, talk to your therapist, get referred to specialists. I think this is very, very important. And the final slide is it's the quote by Sherlock Holmes in this episode called The Six Napoleons. He and Watson have a conversation, and Sherlock Holmes says, I need to go to sleep. And Watson is like, what? We have a problem. Like, how are you going to go to sleep? And he says, Watson, the universal answer to almost all problems is sleep. And I strongly believe that. Thank you very much for being so patient with us.
A big thank you to our three speakers. That concludes our breakout sessions. We will be convening back in the general auditorium, and Senator Warner will be here at noon.